The next session is a brief, a break between what we've heard so far, bringing it all together into a discussion around what's happening under the Australian Agricultural Sustainability Framework. So as you know, that's an initiative that has been underway, being led by NFF and supported by the Australian Government. There are a number of projects that actually operate under that banner, if you like, and here to give you an update on the progress of those projects is the AASF Project Manager, Anwen Lovett. So Anwen is also in her capacity as Project Manager for the AASF with NFF. Anwen is also the Executive Manager of the Council of Rural Research and Development Corporations, part-time. So Anwen has deep experience in sustainable agriculture and agricultural research, development and extension, and she has led several multi-partner and collaborative programs between industry, government and the RDCs. And she's also held 2 senior executive positions in 2 RDCs, CRCs and industry bodies. So please join me in welcoming Anwen to the stage.
Thanks everyone. It's great to have a full room today. We were very pleasantly surprised by the interest that this event generated. It's my job to give you an update on the actual suite of activities going on under what we know to be the second stage of the Australian Ag Sustainability Framework. I'm going to share a lot of information with you today. I'm sorry, but I am going to do that to you. But what I am also going to say is that right at the end of this presentation, I'm going to talk about a consultation paper that we're currently putting together about the AASF, which we're going to share out with stakeholders, it's moving on me, over the next 2 or 3 months to invite you to reflect on some of the activities I'm about to show you and give us your feedback and your thoughts as we move into what's quite an important stage of this program. So please don't feel like this is the only time you're going to get to hear about or see what I'm going to share with you. We're creating an opportunity for you to continue the conversation with us over the next few months. I'm not going to spend a heap of time on this slide. We've spent most of the morning talking about what we're responding to in terms of the AASF initiative, but all of the work this room does around sustainability in agriculture. We're looking to positively engage in that country-to-country dialogue. We heard it right at the beginning of today, both from the Minister, but also the experience that DJ has overseas and other people like Sue McCluskey who are out there telling the rest of the world how fantastic our industry is. We're also responding to that demand that we're seeing coming through the supply chain and through the finance sector about demonstrating the sustainability of this industry. So in particular in this stage of the ASF, we're focusing on 4 main areas. The first one is reputation, which we spend a lot of time on already today. And then the next 2 are really the activities I'm about to show you, which is around how we can work together as an industry to develop a set of clear and credible sustainability measures that we can all work to and can all assist us with our reporting, and how do we enable decision making through robust data and scientific research. And I am going to show you the work that we're doing around data. And last, what this room is all about today, how we foster a collaborative approach to working together on sustainability that benefits all of us. What is the ASF? It's a framework of 17 principles. It's a sustainability framework that aligns with ESG. Behind the 17 principles are criteria which talk about the measurable states that we might look to ultimately report against to understand how we're tracking against the principles. And we are now starting to delve into the topic of indicators and metrics for the ASF, which will actually be the mechanism by which we can think about reporting through those criteria and to those principles. How was it designed? Well, this work was led by the Australian Farm Institute, and today we're lucky to have both Justin and I think I also saw Cade in the room from the AFI. So all of you who can stay for drinks, please follow up and pick their brains about the framework. Justin has been living and breathing indicators, so he's your indicator guy. They did a major trawl and scan across both international and domestic schemes to come up with the 17 ASF principles. And for people who love detail, I can give you 17 of these slides to actually show you how we've thought about alignment in the AASF. So if you want detail, I can give you detail. But this is really important because we've thought very carefully about what we mean when we talk about alignment between AASF and all of the work of the commodity frameworks. And it's not about every framework having exactly the same thing in their frameworks. It's about developing an alignment that actually tells us the whole of Australian agriculture story. So what are we busy doing in ASF at the moment? These are, don't even remember how many, it's 8 or 9 streams of activity in the current project that we have funded with the Australian government. What you can see is that we are coming to the halfway point in the current suite of activities. We have some which are either completed or reaching maturity, and some that are sort of halfway through and will reach maturity by the middle of next year. The actual project itself runs through into mid-2026, and we're already starting to think through what the next phase of work might need to be to build on where this current phase concludes. What I'm going to do today is show you the progress in some of these activities. I'll be leaving the sustainability credentials to Angela to talk about, but I'll be touching on everything else on that list. Materiality assessments. I know there's lots of people in this room who live and breathe materiality assessments. What it's about is understanding what is important to our stakeholders, but also to the markets and people who want to buy the product. ASF had its first materiality assessment completed in May this year. That work was led by ERM in partnership with Robin Leeson, who I know is in the room somewhere. And they undertook that materiality assessment through a process of desktop review and also interviews and engagement both with international stakeholders and also stakeholders at home. And I know there's quite a few people in the room who contributed to that. We also ran a survey to get wider feedback. So we got our first dot graph of materiality for ASF. And what's interesting about this when you look at it is that you need to look at this from a whole of Australian ag perspective, and you can see that those topics where we most frequently come together on are up in the top right-hand quadrant of the matrix. We also know that anything that actually gets to the matrix is important, and that's something we were talking about sheep today. So even something like cybersecurity, which I was very surprised to see right in the bottom left-hand corner, given some of the hacking cases and incidents we've had more recently, it's important, so it's there, and it'll be interesting to see whether things like that might grow over time. Things like R&D as well, I was surprised that it sat a bit lower, but we did this with, in parallel with the grains industry materiality assessment, and for grains it was much harder, and those are the differences that you'll see between individual specific commodity issues and what's actually important from a whole of agriculture perspective. One of the other valuable insights from this is the opportunity to collaborate more across commodities and industries on materiality. So one of the pieces of information that fed into this materiality assessment were all of the materiality assessments that commodity frameworks have already done, like beef, sheep, cotton, that are all in the room today. And in fact, there's probably an opportunity for us to have a more integrated approach into the future where we can actually cycle when we do materiality, so we have this almost constant feedback of intelligence coming into the industry around what's actually important and what's emerging for us to think about. From that matrix, the team then actually looked at the principles and criteria of the AASF as it stands now and have provided us with a set of recommendations about what amendments or improvements to ASF we might want to make to keep it fit for purpose. And our timeline on this is to actually release the next version of the ASF in the middle of 2025. So we're actually taking our time to consider the recommendations, and there's an opportunity for all of our stakeholders to give feedback on these recommendations through that process that I mentioned at the start of my presentation. Interestingly, they're suggesting we think about potentially 2 new principles, one around energy and one around climate adaptation, and the climate adaptation more from an economic perspective. The other area where there was the most additions suggested is to think about the criteria, which we found quite useful as the framework starts to mature, around criteria, which when I look at it is providing a bit more specificity about what we might mean behind some of the principles. So moving on to the next area of work, which is Justin's world, and this is the work that AFI are doing for us right now, is starting to think about what a report against ASF might look like. And one of the reasons we started doing this was to actually test how you might go about this process, and then based on what we learnt from that testing, actually feed that back into, well, what does that actually mean for data and addressing indicators in ASF. So all of these projects I'm showing you today, you actually have feedback loops and inform each other, and all feed into telling us what the sort of ultimate functions, services and operations we might need for an ASF to be maintained into the future. So there's going to be two outputs from this work that AFI are working on. The first one is a preliminary report, which will be an aggregation and synthesis of all of the work that the commodities are already doing that relate to the 17 principles of ASF. And that's an opportunity really for us to amplify all of the work that's going on to support that Australian agricultural narrative we've heard so much about today. The second output, which is middle of next year, is the first set of proposed indicators for ASF and how we might report against that. And we're running a very deliberate process around those. There's a draft set of indicators that people can now provide feedback on, and will be in the consultation paper for you to have a look at. I had to put this up, Justin. This is what Justin spent a year and a half doing, literally going out there and evaluating and assessing all of the possible indicators we could use to report against ASF, filtering those through and coming up with the possible set that might actually be the most useful for us moving forward. What this also does is inform our thinking around the data ecosystem, which is the next piece of work that I'm going to come to, because of course anything like this for a framework ongoing is going to need to be living and dynamic. We can't just do it once and go job done, move on. We actually need to think about how we're actually going to maintain this over time. So the data ecosystem is a project that I know quite a few of you have participated in terms of a series of workshops we've been running over the last few months. Thank you to everyone who has contributed to this activity. For me, I think this is one of the most powerful outputs of the work that we've been doing thus far coming out of ASF. So when we started to ask about data for ASF, but also data to help sustainability reporting more broadly in Australia, no one was about to give us $200 million to solve the problem. So we kind of went, well, what can we do with the resources that we have available? And really thinking through how can we actually make the environment around data that we have now work more efficiently for us, so that we've actually got data out there that we could be using but we can't access. And David Lemon will tell you, because he's spoken to lots of people in sustainability and data Australia in these days, that everyone's got their elbows out and the system really is quite anarchic, which is kind of a bit strange in terms of it's not really in the interest of the industry to be operating like that. So David and Laura have been running a process to actually get everyone in the room to talk about this, to actually identify what are the governance arrangements, what are the institutional arrangements, what are the systems and processes that we could develop as a collective by industry and with government to actually make it easier to access the data we've got, but to be much clearer about where we might actually want to invest in data. And ultimately, and a big driver that you've heard from NFF today, is how can we make this more efficient and how can we mitigate the burden of what's being passed through to farmers. So the project has gone through a couple of stages, and everyone who was at March, we know we worked you mercilessly, but that was done on purpose. And this was the feedback from that group about these are the 9 use cases for why we want to access and use sustainability data in Australia. Now the team took that away, and initially we thought we might actually pilot and test use cases, but they actually came back to us and said, no, what would actually be more useful is when we looked at those use cases, we realised that behind those use cases there were 4 key areas that you would want to resolve to actually be able to solve the sustainability use case questions that were on the last slide. So we stood up 4 working groups who were charged with working through questions around these 4 topics. The first one around guidelines and policies, the next around standards, the third around identifiers. I hear the identifiers workshop was particularly fun, David. And the last one around actually how do we facilitate data aggregating, sharing and discovery. So from this work, we now have a final report, which I haven't read yet, but the guys tell me I'm going to get it next week. But they gave me a slide which I really like. I love a good visual, and I said to them, is it okay if I share this today? But they're starting to conceptualise for us what the sustainability data ecosystem looks like in Australia, and starting to help us think through what areas could ASF usefully play a role in assisting and enabling, and what are the other areas with which that needs to interact that we also probably need to think about resolving some challenges in. So the advice coming through to us is that if you think about a data ecosystem for sustainability moving forward, it's going to need to have things like registers, catalogues, processes, governance arrangements, and the maintenance of this collaborative process that we've all been involved in to actually make this system work and operate. Now, if anyone wants to ask a question about this, David and Laura have been warned, and they're very happy to talk to you about it. But I'm pretty excited with where this work is getting to. But we're also doing some other things. This is work that KPMG have been doing for us, and it sort of emerged from finding consistent feedback around, oh, I've been using the ASF to do this, or I looked at the ASF for that, and we went, oh, okay, people are using the ASF, this is great, maybe we better think about giving some advice on how you could use it, and what it's actually for and what it's actually trying to do. So we now have I'd call it a working draft guidance document. It's out in the world, very keen to have your feedback about it. And it's really useful for either if you're thinking about how you might want to use ASF for an industry level framework, or even within a business, but also as an information for people who might have heard about ASF and want to learn more. So it's been written to meet a few levels of interest. And one of the things I like about it is that it's been structured in 3 levels, and you can interact with it depending on what level you think you're at. So foundational, which is just exploring, just wanting to know more information, what is this sustainability thing about, through to intermediate, oh, I might actually want to prepare a report, or I might actually want to think about what sustainability looks like in my business or for my industry group. And then advanced, oh God, I've actually got to do a report. How do I go about doing that? So this is still a work in progress, but we've got it out there. It's being tested and used. Please have a look at it. Very keen to keep working on it. And here's some examples of who's been using ASF and who's been giving us feedback on it. And in fact, these guys actually gave us a lot of help on what that guidance document needed to cover. Given they'd gone and applied and tested the ASF on their own, they were able to come back and tell us, well, these are the sort of things that could help us to use it. And you can see that there was a fairly consistent set of feedback around that source of truth, and we've heard a lot about trust today. And we take our responsibility in ASF around truth really, really seriously. And that is why we will be very deliberate about anything we share out to the industry about sustainability and how we might demonstrate our sustainability, and work hard to continue to engage with the industry on that. We've also heard this morning around its value around that multi-commodity, multi-enterprise perspective around sustainability. We have so many multi-commodity farmers in Australia, and starting to enable some consistency in reporting. And you can see, last but not least, that ability to encourage alignment, but wouldn't metrics and indicators be great? So that was also consistent bit of feedback. We've taken that one more step, and we're now starting to, we've called them piloting, but really these, I think, are sort of deep conversations around how you can use ASF to assist you with your reporting. And the first pilot that we've run, thank you very much to Nutrien for helping us to put this together. It was a pilot with Nutrien, Gallagher, Thomas Foods and McDonald's, where we had a conversation in that pre-competitive space about what are your challenges and needs to actually meet your sustainability reporting requirements. And we drilled down around greenhouse gas reporting in that group. We're working on another pilot with a large retailer, which should be in 2025, and we're hoping to kick off the third with a financial institution actually in the fairly near future. So again, the feedback that we get from this sort of a process in terms of the continuous improvement of ASF and what we need to think about ASF in terms of operationalising it long term has been absolutely gold. And we're really grateful to everyone who has participated and helped us. So all of that package of work I've just shown you is informing this task. So we're calling this strategy and operations, and those of you who have been around ASF for a while will know that AFI completed some work for us around thinking about what you would need to put in place to govern an ASF to be established ongoing. We're taking that work now to the next step in terms of thinking through what is a strategy and an operating structure for ASF, and KPMG and Angela Schuster are helping us with this. This is also in the consultation document that we're inviting you to have a look at and give us some feedback on, but we're working through things like value proposition, strategic framework, what sort of institutional arrangements would you need, and what sort of services could ASF actually provide to assist the industry. And this will be working through until middle of May next year, and then we'll be taking that out and talking further. Any stakeholder involved in the ASF community of practice will keep getting exposed to this piece of work as it matures and evolves. We are very fortunate to have an advisory committee in place to assist us with this work. We had about 40 odd applications for this advisory committee when we went out and invited expressions of interest. They have now met twice, and they are proving to be a really valuable resource of critical and experienced minds in terms of thinking around how we operationalise ASF. My last slide was about international engagement. I think we've heard lots about that. The only thing I think I will mention is the GIFBI partnership, which AFI leads, which is a group of members from Canada, the Farm Foundation in the US, and the Forum for Future of Ag in the EU. AFI will be continuing to lead holding GIFBI events over the next few years, and it's something that ASF participates in and supports. Last but not least, here's the consultation paper that I've mentioned. We've got some website issues this week, so I think it'll be available next week. You'll be happy to hear it's only 20 pages, the consultation paper itself, but with a whole lot of links and connections into the work ASF's been doing. So we feel like there's a maturing in the program of work that we've been doing. We've got a lot of information to share now. We've got a lot of insights to share. And we thought very hard about how can we consolidate that in a format that is digestible and easier to use and access for people. So hopefully we'll have partly achieved that with this. The paper itself is really a guide to help you deep dive into some of the areas that I've talked about today. And as I said, there's an invitation to give us your thoughts and feedback, and that will be open and available through to February next year. That process then informs our thinking about things like the strategy and ops. So that's all I had. Thanks for listening to me, and I'll hand over to Ange.